Nobody told the 18-month-old boy that the man he was sleeping on was supposed to be dead by sunrise. His tiny cheek pressed flat against Ji-hoon Kang's chest. One small hand curled open over the man's heart like he was listening for something only babies could hear. Below him, the most feared Korean man in New York lay perfectly still, eyes open, jaw slack, skin gone the color of old paper. The poison was already in his blood. Military grade. No antidote. His own men were downstairs deciding who would take the empire when he died. But the dying man hadn't moved an inch since the toddler crawled onto him out of nowhere. Something inside his chest had quietly decided, not yet. Before we go further, hit subscribe. Drop your city and the time it is for you in the comments. We read everyone. Stay with this story to the end. Because what happens in this house over the next 3 weeks will break your heart and rebuild it in the same breath. The Hanmi deal had gone perfectly. That was what made it so clean, so humiliating. Everything had gone according to plan, and Ji-hoon Kang had still walked out of that hotel ballroom on the brink of death. The room had been full of the right people saying the right things, crystal glasses raised. Handshakes held a second too long, the way they always were when men who didn't trust each other pretended otherwise. He had taken just one drink. He always did. Just one. He had been careful, always careful, ever since he was 19 and learned, in the most permanent way possible, what happens to men in his world who let their guard down for a single moment. One glass. One glass was all it took. He felt it on the drive back to Manhattan, a heat in his stomach that had no business being there, spreading upward with a slow, deliberate patience that told him immediately this was not food, not alcohol, not anything natural. His private doctor met him at the gate of his Upper East Side penthouse. 12 hours, Mr. Kang. 24 at most. There is no treatment, I'm sorry. Ji-hoon nodded once, walked upstairs alone. He didn't call his second-in-command, he didn't summon his lawyers. He didn't wake the 3 lieutenants whose entire job was to handle exactly this kind of crisis. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark. 17 years of surviving things that should have killed him. And it would be one glass of whiskey at a table full of smiling men that finally brought him down. He almost laughed. It came out wrong. He stopped. 3 floors below, a young black woman named Aisha Williams was mopping the marble at 11:15 at night. She had not gone home. She rarely did anymore. There wasn't much waiting for her in her small Brooklyn apartment except memories she couldn't outrun. She paused by the window, looked out at Manhattan blurring through the rain, and the memory came the way it always came, uninvited. Brooklyn, 2 years ago, October. Her brother Marcus, 26, 9th grade English teacher at PS 142 in Bed-Stuy. Marcus, who had called her Sis since she was 5. Marcus, who walked to a bodega on Fulton Street at 9 on a Tuesday night to buy a can of Similac for his nephew. He never made it home. A turf war. A stray bullet. 3 of them, actually. Aisha had identified the body. The plastic bag with the formula was still tied to his wrist, like he'd refused to let go of it, even at the end. Down the hall, in the staff bunk room, her son Theo was asleep. He had Marcus's chin, the exact shape of it. She picked up the mop again. At 2:31 in the morning, the lights went out across the entire estate. The backup generators didn't kick in. Somewhere in the basement, a tampered fuse refused to come back online. In the dark of the east wing, a door that had been firmly closed swung slowly open. Ji-hoon heard it before he saw anything. A soft sound, the particular rhythm of someone moving who had no idea they were supposed to be quiet. Then a weight at the foot of his bed. Then a slow, determined crawl upward across the mattress, pausing twice, resuming, until something warm and solid pressed against his left side and stopped moving. Ji-hoon turned his head. The toddler looked back at him with the enormous, unimpressed eyes of someone who had just located a perfectly acceptable sleeping arrangement and saw no reason to explain itself further. Then the boy yawned, a full, jaw-cracking, completely unbothered yawn. He laid his cheek on Ji-hoon's chest, closed his eyes. Ji-hoon stared at the ceiling. The warmth spread. He told himself it was just body heat, simple physics. His nervous system reacting the way any body would in the dark. There was nothing miraculous about it. He was a practical man. He did not believe in signs. He did not believe in mercy. He certainly did not believe the universe occasionally looked down at a dying man and decided, not yet. His heartbeat steadied. The fire in his chest pulled back another degree. He did not move the child. Aisha found them at 2:49. She came through the door fast, her heart in her throat, her eyes already scanning. Then she stopped. Ji-hoon Kang, flat on his back, her son on his chest, both of them breathing. She crossed the room, reached for Theo. Don't. The word stopped her hand in midair. She looked at Ji-hoon's face. He was watching her with eyes exhausted and burning and stripped of every layer she had ever seen on a powerful man's face. The performance was gone, the authority, the careful management of how much he let you see. All of it, gone. Just a man in the dark, holding very still around something that was keeping him alive. The pain, he said, his voice came out rough. It's less. Aisha looked down at her son. Theo's fingers had found the pocket of Ji-hoon's shirt and were holding on loosely in sleep the way he held things he had decided were his. "I'll stay outside the door," she said quietly. Ji-hoon didn't answer. His eyes had dropped back to Theo, and then, slowly, like a man who hadn't made a gentle movement in years, he rested one palm flat against her son's small back. Aisha walked to the doorway. Leaned against the wall outside, she stood there until morning. At 6 o'clock, the doctor returned. He checked Ji-hoon's vitals, stared at the monitor for a long, long time. "Mr. Kang, the compound levels. This rate of decline, I have never." He stopped. "Medically, I cannot explain what happened in this room overnight." Theo was awake now, standing in Ji-hoon's lap on unsteady legs, both fists locked in the man's collar, babbling with the conviction of someone making an extremely important point. Ji-hoon looked at the boy the way a man looks at something he doesn't have the vocabulary for yet. In the corridor, the doctor passed Aisha, still leaning against the wall. "He's going to live," he said. Aisha held his gaze. "Good," she said it the right way. Warm, relieved. She was very good at saying things the right way. Ji-hoon did not tell anyone what had happened in that room. Not Ryu Seok, his second in command, who appeared at his door at 7, with the careful face of a man who had spent the night preparing to take over. Not the 3 lieutenants who filed in by 8, with the energy of men caught mid-betrayal by someone's inconvenient survival. He sat at the head of the long table in yesterday's shirt and told them the antidote had worked. Nobody questioned it. Nobody looked at each other. Ji-hoon watched them file out, watched who exhaled with relief, who exhaled with disappointment, who kept their face so neutral it was its own kind of answer. He had one name by the time they reached the stairs: Park Jae-min. 11 years with the Kang Group, cried at Ji-hoon's mother's funeral. Park had also gone too still when Ji-hoon walked into that sitting room alive. That was all it had taken. Ji-hoon planned to deal with him by nightfall. But before nightfall came something Ji-hoon had not planned for. 12:15. He was in his second-floor office, alone. His body was still weak. Park walked in without knocking. "Just checking in, boss. After last night, I wanted to see you with my own eyes." "Sit down, Park." Park did not sit. He took 2 steps closer, his right hand drifting toward the small of his back. Ji-hoon was just registering the angle when the crash came, from the corridor, the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting marble. Park's head snapped toward the door, half a second. That was all Ji-hoon needed. The Glock came up from the desk drawer. 2-shot center mass. Before Park finished turning back around, Park dropped. The office went very quiet. Then Ji-hoon heard the small voice. "Uh-oh." Theo was standing in the doorway, barefoot, stuffed elephant by one ear, looking at the floor lamp he had apparently just pulled over. The boy looked up, saw Park on the carpet, saw the gun. And he did the thing 18-month-olds do, which was the thing no adult would ever do. He'd simply identified the one familiar face in the room and lifted both arms. "June," he said. "Up." Ji-hoon set the Glock down very slowly. Aisha was already running up the staircase calling Theo's name in the real voice, not her work voice. She came around the corner, saw the body first. Her son, Theo. She crossed the room in 3 strides, scooping him up. "Don't look, baby. He's fine," Ji-hoon said. His voice was lower than usual. Theo was clinging to her neck, perfectly content, already pulling at her earring. Her eyes went to the body, to the gun. Back to Ji-hoon. What happened? He came to finish the job from last night. She absorbed this without flinching, which he noticed. "And the lamp?" "Your son knocked it over." The noise gave me half a second, a long pause. "Twice now?" Ji-hoon said quietly. "Your son has saved my life twice." She didn't answer. If she'd opened her mouth, she would have broken open completely. Not in this room. Not with the phone in her back pocket that had buzzed 20 minutes ago. She nodded once, tight, controlled. Ji-hoon stood up from the desk. "I need you and Theo out of the staff quarters. Tonight, the West Wing has a guest suite. It locks from the inside, until I find out who Park was working with." "It's not appropriate," she said. The other staff will not be a problem." "Mr. Kang." "Ji-hoon." She stopped. "You used my name last night. Use it now. A beat. Ji-hoon. People will talk. People talked the moment your son walked into my room and didn't come out. Let them." He stepped past her. Mrs. Chen, the head of household, was already at the top of the staircase with the composed expression of a woman who had heard gunshots in this building before. "West Wing guest suite. Crib, childproofing. Tonight." "Yes, Mr. Kang. And the body is already handled, sir." The West Wing guest suite was 3 times the size of Aisha's bunk room. She stood in the doorway with Theo on her hip. Wide bed. Afternoon light through thin curtains, a fresh crib in the corner. Theo squirmed down and toddled across the floor, delighted by the echo. She sat on the edge of the bed. She had not intended to sleep in this house. She had not intended a great many things that were currently happening. She took the phone out. The message was from a contact saved under 2 letters. "DP heard about the incident. Park Jae-min, mid-level. Are you all right?" Aisha stared at it for a long time. "Daniel Pierce, 50, white, prematurely gray. 22 years FBI before they pushed him into early retirement for digging too deep into Kang Group's books. He had found her in a Queens diner 6 weeks after Marcus's funeral. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone. I'm asking you to be my eyes inside that house. Documents, names, I bring them down legally. For Marcus, she had said yes 18 months ago. She typed, fine. We'll report later. Deleted the thread. Put the phone face down. Theo had found the curtain and was bunching the fabric in both fists. Come here, baby, she said softly. He came. He always came when she used that voice. The real one. He climbed into her lap, and she wrapped both arms around him and stayed very still. Outside, Manhattan was going about its afternoon. Somewhere in the building, the most dangerous Korean man in the city was alive because her son had pulled over a lamp. That night, Ji-hoon ate alone for the first time in 3 days without the pain making it impossible. He thought about the boy's face in the office doorway, the complete absence of fear, the arms going up like the world was simple. At 8:47, he sent a message to Mrs. Chen. The message: proper crib upgrade, child-proofing locks, standing authorization for Aisha to access the kitchen during off hours so Theo could eat a real breakfast whenever he woke up. Outside, Manhattan glittered through the windows. Enormous, indifferent. He picked up his chopsticks. 8. Stayed. Three days passed, then 5, then a week. Nobody on the staff said anything directly. They were paid well enough to know that saying things directly in this house was a fast way to stop being paid at all. But the talk moved through the estate the way talk moves through closed spaces. In glances. In pauses before answers. The West Wing corridor, unused for years, was now somewhere Ji-hoon Kang walked in the evenings. Slowly, without apparent destination. Ji-hoon, who had not been observed to smile in recent memory, had been seen twice now crouching on the corridor floor in his $5,000 suit, doing something with a bottle cap and a toddler that looked, from a distance, almost like a game. The staff said nothing, but they noticed. And somewhere in the quiet pulse of the building, something was beginning to shift. Theo learned Ji-hoon's name in his own way, which was to say he didn't learn it at all and instead assigned him a new one. It happened on a Tuesday. Aisha was finishing the windows in the East Wing when she heard it. Theo's voice from around the corner. Hi, certain. June, he was saying. June. She came around the corner. Theo was on the floor. Ji-hoon was crouched in front of him, forearms on his knees, still in his morning meeting clothes. Not the dangerous stillness from before, something quieter. June, Theo said again, and placed both hands on Ji-hoon's face. Ji-hoon held very still and allowed this. Aisha leaned against the wall. He can't say the full name. He shortens everything. June is fine, Ji-hoon said. His voice had the slightly altered quality it always had around Theo. Lower. Slower. Sanded down at the edges. Theo patted his cheek twice, then held up both arms. The pause lasted less than 2 seconds. Then Ji-hoon picked him up. He stood there in the corridor of his own house, holding a toddler who had immediately grabbed a fistful of his collar. He looked like a man who had not been prepared for how natural that would feel. Aisha looked away first. He started talking to her in the evenings. He would find her finishing the corridor and ask something functional. Was the new crib the right size? Did the kitchen staff give Theo any trouble? She would answer. He would stand with his back against the exhibit's wall, and they would exist in the same space for a few minutes before one of them moved on. But the questions shifted. How long have you been in New York? 3 years. Lagos. Then London for a year. Then here. That's a long way. It is. He was quiet for a moment. Why New York? Work. And I wanted somewhere that felt different from everything before. He accepted that. He didn't push. Most people pushed. The implicit question, the one that was really about Theo's father and why she was alone, the things that made people feel entitled to a woman's history. Ji-hoon didn't ask. He just nodded once. She filed that away. She filed everything away. You? She said. The question came from somewhere that wasn't the plan. Did you always want this? No, he said. Just the one word, but the weight of it was enormous. I wanted something else when I was young enough to want things. What happened to it? He pushed off from the wall. Same thing that happens to most things. Someone took it. He walked away. She stood with her mop and tried not to feel what she was feeling. She was getting worse at it. The gift appeared on a Friday. Aisha came into the West Wing room after her shift and found a bag on the table. Handle tied, no note. Inside, a set of children's wooden building blocks. Underneath, a small padded jacket in Theo's approximate size. Deep navy blue. The kind with the proper lining that New York winters demanded. The kind she had been putting off buying because the good ones cost more than 2 days of her wage. She sat down, ran her thumb along the stitching. There was no note. There didn't need to be. There was only one person in this house who knew Theo's current jacket had a broken zipper she'd been fixing with a safety pin for 2 weeks. Because Ji-hoon had noticed. The quick downward glance one morning, the slight tightening around his eyes. She had not expected him to do anything about it. Her phone buzzed. DP 2 weeks since your last update. Are you compromised? The memory came uninvited. A Queen's diner. Daniel sliding a folder across the table. Photographs of Marcus on the sidewalk. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone. I'm asking you to be my eyes. She had said yes. Some nights, in the months that followed, the part of her that was not a good person had wanted more than documents. She had thought about what it would feel like for him to lose something the way she had lost something. She had told herself it was just a thought. She typed not compromised, slow-weeded, put the phone away. Theo was on the floor stacking the new blocks. June, he said to himself, placing a red block on a yellow one with immense satisfaction. Aisha closed her eyes. The fever came on a Sunday night. It came fast, the way toddler fevers always do. One moment, Theo was fine. The next, he was heavy and glassy-eyed in her arms, his small body radiating heat that had no business being that intense. 39.4. High, but not emergency high. She had children's acetaminophen in her bag. She knew what to do. What she did not have at 10 o'clock at night in the wing of a Korean Maya boss's penthouse was anyone. She was sitting on the floor with his head in her lap when the door opened. Ji-hoon stood in the doorway in a dark shirt, sleeves rolled. He took in the scene. The thermometer on the carpet, the medicine bottle in her hand. He didn't say anything. Came in, sat on the floor across from her, put the back of his hand against Theo's forehead. Theo looked up at him. June, he said miserably. I know, Theo. He stayed. He stayed for 2 hours. He didn't make a spectacle of his presence. He just sat against the side of the bed while Theo's fever crept down toward manageable, handing her the cloth when she needed a fresh one, saying low, quiet things in Korean to Theo when the child stirred. At midnight, Theo finally slept the deep kind of sleep, his breathing even, his face cooler under her palm. The room was very quiet. You didn't have to stay, she said softly. I know. She looked at him. Across the sleeping child between them, she looked at him properly, the way she almost never let herself. His face in the low light was open in the way it only got in this room, with this child, the armor completely down. Ji-hoon, she said. His name, not Mr. Kang. For the first time, she watched what it did to his face. The brief, involuntary stillness of it, like a key turning somewhere. You both make me want to live, he said. Low, rough, the words of a man who had not said anything true out loud in a very long time. I don't know what to do with that. Aisha held his gaze for one long, devastating moment. Then she looked down at Theo, at his sleeping face, at the tiny hand curled under his chin. She felt the thing she had been refusing to feel move through her chest like a current. Warm and terrible. Neither do I, she said. She meant it. That was the problem. She meant it from the part of her with nothing to do with plans. It would make everything harder. Ryu Seok came to him on a Wednesday with the careful face that meant bad news delivered tactfully. The men are talking about the maid and the child. Ji-hoon didn't look up. Men always talk. Shin's people have noticed. They're reading it as vulnerability. Let them read it. Ji-hoon. Ryu Seok almost never used his name without a title. Shin already tried to kill you once. If he believes you have someone worth targeting, he'll move against them directly. Ji-hoon set the document down, and I'll finish what he started. I've been waiting for a reason. And the woman, the child. You can't promise Theo won't get caught in it. I said he won't get the chance. There was a long pause. Ryu Seok looked at his boss. The absolute stillness of him, the certainty. This wasn't strategy. This was something older than strategy. Understood. He left without saying what he was thinking, which was that in 20 years he had never seen Ji-hoon Kang make a promise like that. Ji-hoon told Aisha that night. He came to the West Wing after 9 and knocked, which he had never done before. She opened the door with Theo asleep behind her. There are people who will try to use you, to get to me. Is this about the man who poisoned you? Partially. The other part is that you're here, and I'm not willing to be careless about that. If I move to the secure floor, what does that mean? He crossed the distance between them in 3 steps, stopped close enough that the careful professional distance she had maintained for weeks was simply no longer possible. It means I'm done pretending I'm not afraid of something happening to you. You and Theo are not staff to me anymore. You haven't been for a while. I think you know that. She thought about the phone in her bag. The contact saved as 2 letters. I know, she said quietly. He reached up. His hand came to the side of her face. His thumb traced once along her cheekbone, the gentlest thing she had ever seen him do. Whatever this is, I'm not afraid of it. You should be, she whispered. She hadn't meant to say it. His hands stilled. His eyes were searching hers. I just mean, be careful. After everything. She stepped back. He looked at her a moment longer. Something in his face settled. I'll have the room prepared tonight. The secure floor was on the 3rd level. Mrs. Chen brought her up Friday morning. The room was larger than anything Aisha had lived in, ever, floor-to-ceiling windows, a proper kitchen alcove, a separate sleeping area for Theo with a new crib already fitted, books at toddler height, a mobile turning slowly above the crib that threw small colored lights across the ceiling. Theo walked in, turned in a full circle, and said, Whoa. Mrs. Chen permitted herself the smallest possible smile. Mr. Kang asked that you have everything you need. If anything is missing, you tell me directly, not the general staff line. Me. The distinction was delivered quietly but landed with full weight. Woman telling another woman in the language of households exactly what category she now occupied. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. The older woman held her gaze for one measured moment. Recognition. She nodded once and left. The first sign came 3 days later. Aisha was in the courtyard when she saw the car, dark, unmarked, parked across the service road. That evening, when Ji-hoon appeared in her doorway, she said without preamble, dark sedan, service road behind the east wall. 40 minutes this afternoon. Different plates from this morning, same model. Ji-hoon went very still. You saw it this morning too? I see most things. How did you know what to look for? I grew up in a neighborhood where you learn to read cars and corners before you learn to read books. It was true. It was also not the whole truth. He studied her face with the attention of a man who had built a life on reading people. But he didn't push. Stay off the courtyard until I deal with Shin. How long? Not long. He dealt with it in 4 days. She didn't ask how. On Thursday evening, he came to the secure floor with the loosened quality of someone who had put down a weight. He brought food. That was the thing that undid her. Not the gesture, the specificity. He arrived with containers from a Nigerian restaurant 40 minutes across the city. Egusi soup. Fried plantain. Jollof rice still warm. How did you know? Mrs. Chen mentioned you hadn't been eating. I asked why. You asked your head of household why your maid wasn't eating. He looked up at that. I asked because I wanted to know. Stop calling yourself my maid. They ate on the floor. Ji-hoon sat with his back against the couch in his work clothes, eating jollof rice from a bowl, redirecting Theo's aggressive approach to the plantain. He looked so completely at ease that Aisha had to look away several times to manage herself. Tell me something nobody knows. He considered this seriously. I used to draw when I was young. Architecture. Buildings, I had notebooks full of them. What happened to them? The brief silence told her the answer before he did. My father burned them. He had a specific idea about what I was for. His voice was even. The evenness itself was the wound. I stopped drawing after that, seemed pointless. She thought about a 16-year-old boy watching his notebooks burn, about her own things that had been taken. You could still draw, she said. He looked at her with an expression she felt in the back of her throat. Maybe. The next morning, Theo sat on the floor with the wax crayons Mrs. Chen had quietly delivered. He drew with concentration, tongue between his teeth, one wobbly circle and 4 straight lines stabbing out of it. He held the paper up. June! House! Ji-hoon took the paper. He looked at the boy. He looked at the drawing. Something in him, something that had been frozen for 22 years, broke open very quietly. He folded the paper, put it inside his jacket close to his chest that night. After the building had gone still, Ji-hoon opened the bottom drawer of his desk. There was a sketchbook in there. Blank. He had bought it 11 years ago and never opened it. He took out a pencil. His hand was not steady. He drew anyway. He drew until 3 in the morning. A house. Not a penthouse, not an estate. A real house. 2 stories. Garden along one side, a kitchen with windows that opened, a child's room facing east to catch the morning light. In the corner of the page, he taped the Odell drawing, the wobbly circle, the 4 lines. House. He closed the sketchbook, put it back in the drawer. Upstairs, Aisha's phone buzzed. She heard it through her sleep. She did not get up. For the first time in 18 months, she let it ring. The day everything came apart started on a Tuesday afternoon with 7 shallow stairs, the decorative ones in the secure floor's east garden alcove. Aisha had noticed them when they first moved in, but in the 40 seconds she stepped into the alcove kitchen to turn off the kettle, Theo was fast and 7 steps were all it took. She heard the sound before she heard him cry, a single sharp crack. Then the silence that was worse than crying, the held breath before the scream. He was at the bottom. On his side, the cry came then, the real one. She had him in her arms before she'd finished crossing the alcove. His left arm was held at an angle that made her stomach drop. Okay, baby, I've got you. She knew what a broken bone looked like in a child. She had learned the hard way years ago. What she was looking at required a hospital. Mrs. Chen appeared in Ji-hoon's office doorway at 3:12. In 19 years of working in this building, her face had remained composed through deaths and arrests. She was not composed now. The child, they've taken him to Mount Sinai. His arm, it appeared serious. Ji-hoon was already standing. He arrived 11 minutes later. He found Aisha in the corridor outside the pediatric emergency bay, her back against the wall, Theo behind a curtain, her arms wrapped around herself in the posture of a woman holding her own skeleton together. She looked up. Something moved across her face. Relief and guilt and something deeper before she looked back at the curtain. Left radius, maybe the elbow, they need imaging. Ji-hoon stood beside her, said nothing. He stood close enough that his arm was against hers. They waited. After 7 minutes, a young doctor appeared with a tablet. For imaging and treatment, we need the father's medical history. He looked between them. Are you? No? Aisha said reflexively. Is there a way to reach him? I don't. She stopped. Jihoon felt her go still beside him, a fault line stirring beneath the surface. I don't have contact with him. Her voice had changed. Something underneath was fracturing. I can give you what I know. Anything at all. A B negative. There's a clotting disorder on the paternal grandfather's side. Skipped a generation, but worth screening for. And a rare enzyme deficiency that affects how he processes anesthetics. You need to know that before you give him anything. The doctor was typing rapidly. How do you know the paternal family history if you don't have contact? Because I know who his father is. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I just haven't told him. The doctor looked up, made a rapid professional decision to take the information and ask no further questions. I'll flag the anesthetic note immediately. He disappeared back behind the curtain. The corridor was very quiet. Jihoon stood completely still. Aisha. His voice came out low. She closed her eyes, a B negative. My grandfather's enzyme deficiency, not common knowledge. She said nothing. Look at me. She opened her eyes, turned to face him, and in her face, in the exhausted, utterly stripped expression of a woman who had run out of ways to hold something, he saw the answer to every question he hadn't known he was asking. How long? Since before I came here. You knew when you walked through those gates. Yes, the word landed between them like something dropped from a great height. Jihoon turned away, walked 3 steps, stopped. He was doing what he always did when something hit the foundation, going absolutely still, containing it, except she was witnessing. He turned back around. 2 years ago, there was a woman at the hotel bar. The memory hit him with a clarity it hadn't before. That was you. That was me. You didn't tell me. No. Why? She looked at him steadily, and then she said it. Slowly, 3 weeks after that night, I missed my period. I called the number on the receipt disconnected. By then, I'd seen your name in a Forbes article. I decided I'd raise him alone. A breath. Then on October 12th, my brother Marcus walked to a bodega on Fulton Street to buy infant formula for Theo. He was 26, ninth grade English teacher at PS 142. Her voice was steady. It cost her. He got caught in the crossfire of a turf war. Your turf war, 3 bullets. He died on the sidewalk holding a gallon of Similac. Jihoon did not move. I held his fiancée while she screamed at me in the funeral home parking lot. Why was he out so late, Aisha? Because he was buying formula for my son. Your son. That's when Daniel Pierce found me, ex-FBI. He'd been building a case against you for years. He didn't ask me to hurt you. He asked for documents, names, justice for Marcus. A silence. I said yes. I told myself documents were enough. But there were nights, Jihoon. Nights when the part of me that's not a good person wanted you dead. I'm telling you now, because if I don't say it all the way, I'll never be able to look at our son without it sitting between us. The corridor was utterly silent. Jihoon looked at her, at this woman who had walked into his house carrying a weapon built from grief and used his own son as the blade, who had somewhere along the way put the weapon down. He crossed back to her in 4 steps. His hand came to the side of her face. I'm angry, he said, low, honest. I am what you came here to do. I know, she whispered. But he is my son, and he's yours too. His thumb moved once against her cheek. His jaw was tight. And you are the reason I'm alive to be angry. I don't know what to do with that yet either. Neither do I. So we're going in there. We'll be with our son. When he's safe and sleeping, we'll talk. You still want an after? Ask me again when I've held my son. He pushed the curtain aside. Theo looked up immediately, tear-stained. Left arm in a splint. June, he said, with relief, with accusation. With the absolute certainty of a child who had decided long before any paperwork, or hospital corridors, or truths told in the wrong order, exactly on the edge of the examination bed. Theo leaned into him, his good arm finding the familiar grip on the collar, his head dropping against the chest that had been his from the very first night. Aisha stood at the curtain and watched them. Her phone buzzed. Hospital report says it's serious. Status? She looked at Ji-hoon, at the curve of his back over their son. She typed slowly. It's over. Don't contact me again. I'll find Marcus's justice another way, legally, openly, without using my son. She turned the phone off, walked through the curtain to her family. The attack came on a Thursday night without warning. That was the thing about Shin. He was patient in the way of men who had been underestimated long enough to learn how to use it. He waited until Ji-hoon's attention was divided in exactly the right way, and moved with everything he had at once. Aisha heard it from the secure floor. The sound of the building's ground floor going all at once. Multiple points simultaneously. Coordinated, planned, resourced. She was on her feet before the first shot. Theo was asleep. She checked him once, the deep sleep of a child on pain medication after his cast, and pulled the crib to the interior wall, away from windows, away from the door. Her phone showed nothing. The internal line was dead. She thought for 4 seconds. Then she went into the corridor. She found Ryu Seok on the second floor landing with 2 security men. Get back upstairs. She delivered her refusal in the voice of a woman for whom there was no version of this conversation where she went back upstairs. East Courtyard, they cut the exterior team off. It's not good. She was already moving. The East Courtyard was chaos rendered in shadow and emergency lighting. She slipped through the service door, quick and low. 3 of Shin's men were down already, 2 of Ji-hoon's. The stone fountain was the only real cover. She found Ji-hoon in 3 seconds. He was backed against the east wall, one arm hanging awkwardly, his weapon gone. Shin's enforcer was closing the gap, moving with the calm pace of a man who knew the fight was already over. The expression on Ji-hoon's face in that moment was not fear, it was acceptance. Aisha picked up the weapon on the ground. 3 feet from the service door, she didn't think about it. There was only the enforcer's back and Ji-hoon's face, and a choice that had stopped being a choice somewhere between a blackout and a plastic cap and a Thursday night on a floor eating jollof rice. She fired once. Low. Clean. The enforcer went down. The courtyard went completely still. Ji-hoon looked across the space at her, at the weapon in her hands, at the woman standing in his courtyard in the middle of his war, looking back at him with steady eyes and not a single tremor in her grip. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Then Ryu Seok and his men came through the north gate, and it was over. Afterwards, Ji-hoon sat on the low wall while the doctor taped his arm, dislocated shoulder. A cut on his side deeper than it looked. He sat through all of it without making a sound, watching Aisha. She stood apart from everyone, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the ground near where the enforcer had fallen. The doctor finished. Ji-hoon walked across the courtyard, stopped in front of her. Aisha, look at me. She looked up. Her face was composed, but her eyes were wrong. Too still. You're okay, I know. You saved my life. He looked at her. Where are you? Her jaw tightened. Something cracked behind the careful surface. I came to this house to bring you down, she said. Low, raw. I told myself it was just documents, Daniel's case. But there were nights I wanted you dead, and tonight I just shot a man to keep you alive. Her voice broke. I love you, and I tried to destroy you. I don't know what any of that makes me. Ji-hoon pulled her in. Not gently, both arms, the taped shoulder protesting and neither of them caring. She went rigid for 1 second, then something in her gave, and she grabbed the front of his destroyed shirt with both fists and pressed her face against his chest. I know what it makes you, he said at last, his voice low and rough but certain. It makes you someone who chose when it mattered. When it was real, you chose. That's all any of us ever are. What we choose when it costs something. She pulled back enough to look at him. I'm sorry. For Theo. For using him. It didn't start real. But it is now. I know. How? Because you went into a courtyard with a gun for me. A woman running a plan doesn't do that. She lets the plan finish. Ji-hoon stepped back, reached into the pocket of his destroyed shirt. What he pulled out was not a ring. It was a folded piece of paper, soft at the creases. He held it out. She took it, unfolded it. It was a drawing, architectural, detailed and precise. A house, she realized, not a mansion, not a penthouse. A real house in the Hudson Valley. 2 stories, garden along one side, a children's room with low east-facing windows. In the bottom right corner, taped down carefully, was Theo's drawing. The wobbly circle, the 4 straight lines, house. She looked up at him. He gave me that 3 weeks ago, told me house. I started drawing again that night, first time in 22 years. He gave me back something I lost when I was 16. I want to spend my life trying to repay that. He looked at her with the stripped, unarmored expression she had first seen the night Theo crawled onto his chest. I want you. I want our son. I want to build something that isn't built on what I inherited. And I want to find the men who killed Marcus, not for you, because it's owed. Aisha held the drawing, felt the paper under her fingers. Ask me the question. Now. He took 1 step closer. His good hand came up to the side of her face. Stay, he said. Marry me. The word landed in the courtyard like something alive. Aisha looked at him. The drawing was in her hands. Her son was upstairs asleep. Manhattan blazed beyond the walls. She looked at Ji-hoon's face. At the question on it, raw and real and waiting. At the man who had drawn her a home with east-facing windows before she'd even decided to stay. Yes, just 1 word, but the weight of it was enormous. The whole structure of everything she had carried for 2 years finally laid down. Ji-hoon closed his eyes for 1 long moment. When he opened them, something in his face had changed. The terrifying hope of a man who had survived poisoning and betrayal and a lifetime of chosen emptiness, and had just been answered. He pulled her in, forehead to forehead, the drawing pressed gently between them. Above them, 3 floors up, an 18-month-old boy slept with his good hand curled around a stuffed elephant, completely unaware that the question just answered in the courtyard below would become the first paragraph of every story he'd ever be told about his family. Some answers don't fit in a single word. Some answers are something you build, room by room, year by year, with the people who chose you when it cost them everything. The story ends here. But before you go, the storyteller has 3 things to ask you. First, which moment in this story landed hardest? Was it the night Theo crawled onto a dying man's chest and saved a life he didn't yet know was his father's? Was it the morning a toddler held up a wobbly drawing and said, "House," and gave a 16-year-old boy back the dream his father had burned? Or was it the courtyard, where a woman who came to destroy a man chose in one single second to save him instead? Second, if you were Aisha, standing in that courtyard, you're between a brother she lost and a man she shouldn't love but does, would you have stayed? Would you have said yes, or would you have walked away? Third, and this is the one we read every comment for, drop your city and the time it is for you right now in the comments below. We want to know who's on the other side of this screen. We see you. You're not alone. Here's what this story believes. We are not the worst thing we have ever thought about doing. We are what we choose when it costs us something. And sometimes salvation doesn't come through sermons or grand gestures. It comes through a tiny hand laid over a dying heart, or a child's wobbly drawing of a house given to a man who had stopped believing he was allowed to want one. If this story moved you, hit like. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to put the weapon down. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for staying all the way to the end.